If you're a certain age, that sound did something to the back of your skull. Two shadow heads in the dark throwing letters at each other until a word fell out of the screen. You didn't study it, you just absorbed it. Or that. You couldn't name a single episode, but you'd finish that yell in a grocery store tomorrow. This is The Electric Company, and as an adult, it hits different, and a lot stranger than you remember. The show that vanished.
Hello? Hello! Crack calling. I thought I'd be hearing from you. You've been watching, ain't you? Of course I've been watching.
This is The Electric Company, PBS, 1971 to 1977, made by the same people who made Sesame Street. For a lot of us, it was the first television that felt a little too cool for the room you watched it in. Funk music, psychedelic graphics, grown adults in capes screaming about silent letters. It taught millions of kids to read, won 2 Emmys, and then just vanished from the culture. Most people who loved it can't even tell you it was canceled or why.
A young lady is saying that the letter on her balloon, which is the same letters you can noticeably see, sounds like J.
Here's what knocked me sideways watching it as an adult. As a kid, this felt like beautiful chaos. Weirdos in groovy clothes doing bits. As an adult, you watch the same footage and realize it was never chaos. It was one of the most carefully engineered things ever aimed at a child's face. Who it was really for. There were psycholinguists in the room, 18 months of research before a single frame aired, a national emergency behind it, and hiding in that cast, future legends doing the most thankless work of their careers.
Target.
So today, the mission nobody told us about, the genius trick that made us read without noticing, and the one cast member who spent the whole shoot secretly terrified.
Who is it? It's the plumber. I've come to fix the sink.
Start with the why, because the why is the part that gets me. By 1971, Sesame Street was 2 years old and already a phenomenon. So the Children's Television Workshop founders Joan Gans Cooney and Lloyd Morissette had a question hanging over them. Sesame Street taught the little ones their letters, but what about the kids who aged out of it and still couldn't read? A literacy emergency in disguise.
Cotton candy can cause cavities.
The 8 and 9-year-olds already falling behind, already feeling stupid about it. That was the target, not the cute kindergartner, the 3rd grader in the bottom half of the class, the kid who hated reading because reading had only ever made them feel bad.
I'm just a clown who's feeling down. Yeah.
As Given put it, if you're falling behind by 2nd or 3rd grade, your prognosis is not wonderful. They were trying to catch those kids before the gap became a canyon. And the stakes were real. At the time, government estimates put illiteracy at roughly 1 in 10 Americans, millions more functionally illiterate. The US Office of Education had a campaign called Right to Read, aiming to wipe out illiteracy in the 70s. The funding was tangled up with a literacy push championed by then First Lady Pat Nixon, the Trojan Horse Plan.
I don't know what it is, and I think there might be a catch there.
So read that back. A federal literacy emergency. Pat Nixon, disguised as this. That gap between the seriousness of the mission and the silliness of the surface is the whole magic trick. Hold on to it. Here's what they figured out. The kids who needed this most had already decided anything school-shaped was the enemy. You couldn't reach them with a chalkboard, they had an immune system to that. So the plan? Make something so fast, so funny, so cool, so unschool-like that a kid who hated reading would sit down for the comedy and accidentally take a phonics lesson to the brain.
Today we're going to be doing something very special, and I will not keep you in suspense another moment.
In his words, a comedy show that tried to teach. Comedy first, the teaching rode in on its back. That order caused an enormous amount of fighting behind the scenes. When this was heresy first, they had to invent how to do it. Because in 1971, nobody believed you could.
Yeah, but there's just one problem. You left out the comma.
Research-based children's TV. Sounds normal now. Back then, it was heresy. Fowles was a grad student studying developmental psycholinguistics when they hired her. That's the level of nerd they brought in. She said most people thought it was anathema to use television to teach reading. Teachers thought TV was horrible, the thing rotting your brain. The idea that the brain rot box could be the cure was, to a lot of educators, an insult. So the workshop spent 18 months before launch. Reading experts, academic advisors, and TV writers in one room, fighting it out, building a curriculum around decoding, sounding letters out, the link between the printed letter and the sound it makes, the silent E magic trick.
It's not too hard to see, it's silent E. Who can turn a cub into a cube.
Then they had to make that into something a 9-year-old would choose over cartoons. And some of it is, as an adult, weirdly beautiful. That silhouette bit, one profile owns the front of the word, one owns the back, and they sound their halves until the word snaps together in the middle. That's elegant design.
Howard, he was so romantic. He'd always come running down the block when he saw me on the stoop, and I'd run out to meet him.
It turns blending sounds into a 2-person duet. A 12-year-old named Lynette Murray told NPR back then that the thing that floored her was the silent E. Pull the E off ride, and suddenly it's rid, like a magic trick. Because to her, it was. I rewatched a stack of these before making this video, and the silent E stuff genuinely rewired something. I've carried the concept of a silent E my whole life and never once wondered where it came from. Wait, that's Morgan Freeman. It came from here. Some of you have a song stuck in your head right now and don't know why. Hold that thought. The songs are a crime scene of talent. Which brings us to the cast, where adult you does a spit take.
Yeah, I know, but when I itches, I scratches. And when I'm bored, I reads matches. Oh.
That's Morgan Freeman. That's Morgan Freeman, the voice of God. Shawshank. 40 years before he narrated the literal cosmos, he was on PBS as a character named Easy Reader, a laid-back hippie whose entire personality was that he loved reading so much he could barely stand it. He also played a smooth-talking DJ named Mel Mounds, and a vampire menaced not by garlic, but by the alphabet. As a kid, you have zero context. He's just the cool guy, an EGOT. Yelling about vowels. As an adult, you sit there going, I was taught to read by a future Oscar winner, and I gave him as much thought as I gave the carpet.
Wave this thing around, you know. I get a pretty good reaction to it when I'm playing clubs. But mostly it's just the fed thing.
Right next to him, Rita Moreno, the Hey You Guys lady. One of the few humans alive to win an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony, an EGOT. She'd already won the Oscar for West Side Story a decade before this show. A certified all-time legend, yelling herself hoarse to get struggling third graders to care about a vowel.
Milkman. Leave one of milk.
Right.
I don't get that.
Early seasons also had Bill Cosby, noted for the record, and whose later story casts a long, complicated shadow over this footage now. It keeps going. Judy Graubart came straight out of Second City. The music actually slaps. There was a teen pop group called the Short Circus. Short Circus, Electric Company, get it? And one of those kids was a young Irene Cara, future star of Fame and Flashdance. Guest voices included Gene Wilder, Zero Mostel, and Joan Rivers. The theme was by Joe Raposo, the genius behind the best Sesame Street songs. Tom Lehrer wrote songs for it. And about those songs, this is the crime scene I promised. Go back and listen as an adult, and the music genuinely slaps. Real funk, real soul, horn sections, bass lines, full arrangements. For a show teaching 7-year-olds about vowels. They didn't make kiddie music, they made actual music and pointed it at children. That song stuck in your head for 30 years is stuck because it was good enough to be on the radio. Written by the MASH guys.
Sergeant, have you seen my missing tot?
Oh, calm down, lady. Calm down. Now.
And here's the detail that broke my brain. The comedy writers were among the best in the business, and a bunch of them went on to write for MASH and later Everybody Loves Raymond. So when the jokes felt a cut sharper than they needed to be, you were right. They were written by people who'd go on to make some of the funniest TV ever, aiming all of it at the consonant blend FL.
Like to have a nice big bunch of bluebells.
Oh, bluebells and bunches are just beautiful. Hear you.
Which brings us to my favorite trick the show ever pulled. The one where, as an adult, you suddenly see the strings.
Don't shine on me no more.
The Electric Company had Spider-Man. This was the first live-action Spider-Man ever on a screen, years before any movie, on a PBS kids show, played by a dancer named Danny Segrin. The trick you never noticed. The segment ran from 1974. Spidey would foil some goofy, low-stakes villain, never with violence, just cleverness. The budget was so thin they couldn't afford real effects, so they'd cut to actual comic book panels mid-scene, and it worked anyway.
Welcome once again to Wild Guess. And here's your host, the gal with the best guess yet, Miss Way.
And here's what you did not clock as a kid. This Spider-Man never talked. Not once. Not a single word out loud.
Play our game. Remember, you have to read it before you can answer it.
I know.
Here's the question. Go. Okay.
Everything Spider-Man said appeared in a word balloon over his head, and you, the kid at home, had to read it. That was the point. They took the most exciting character available to a 1977-year-old, the coolest guy in the universe, and made it so the only way to know what he was thinking was to read. Why, that's secretly genius. They weaponized Spider-Man for literacy. As a kid, that's just how Spider-Man is. As an adult, you realize a room of researchers decided, make the thing they love most completely silent, so wanting to know what he says forces them to practice the exact skill we're teaching. That's devious. That's kind of genius. And it worked. I'd have read a phone book if Spidey's lines were in it.
I'm a funny guy, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. I'm a funny guy, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee.
Okay, I've spent this whole video telling you how brilliant it was. Let me do the adult thing and tell you what wasn't.
What I did say was not what I did not say. As for the answer, I will say it not, but I will sing it.
Here's the tension that ran through the whole production, and it's the most grown-up thing about the story. Now the part that didn't work. You had a building full of brilliant comedy writers who wanted to be funny, and a team of curriculum experts whose whole job was to slow them down so a struggling kid could follow. Those two groups were constantly at war.
Now, what do you want on that camel for the upholstery? Vinyl?
No, I'll have camel's hair.
Graubert said being told to slow down, to linger on the word on the screen, could be torture for a performer. Comedy is timing and speed. Teaching a struggling reader is the opposite. It's giving them a second. You can feel that tug of war in the show.
Double-edged, super clean, dynamic steel razor blades. None of that malarkey.
And the curriculum people sometimes lost. Fowles admitted they did a lot of wordplay that was, in her words, probably a mistake. The jokes were hilarious. To an adult. To a sharp kid. The joke that missed its kid. But the target wasn't the sharp kid. It was the kid already struggling, already a little ashamed. And the joke sometimes sailed clean over that kid's head.
Oh, well, those are very nice, yeah, but I believe my sister is going to be wearing false whiskers.
Her example is perfect. There was a detective named Fargo North, Decoder, a pun on Fargo, North Dakota. A struggling 7-year-old does not know Fargo, North Dakota. They don't get it. It's not funny if you're 7 and having a hard time.
You cold, a doctor?
Are you a doctor?
Well, of course. What is this, chopped liver? That's a stethoscope. Now, what's the trouble?
And the kids felt the pace too. NPR back then quoted an 11-year-old, Sherry Presley, who said she liked the show, but it was so fast she hardly had time to think over the sentence. That's the whole problem, in one kid's voice. The speed that made it cool enough to watch was sometimes the exact thing that left the strugglers behind. It worked, so they killed it. That's an adult realization. As a kid, great things are simply great. As an adult, you understand they're full of compromises and arguments and people who deeply disagreed, and that the tension is sometimes why it's good and sometimes why it falls short of its own mission. Both true.
V is in never, and V is in clever. And there always will be a V in forever.
And it worked. A 1977 Educational Testing Service report found a clear, significant impact on its primary target, second graders in the bottom half of the class. 2 Emmys, more than 250 PBS stations, a teaching tool in thousands of classrooms. By its own brutal standard, does it help the kid falling behind? It succeeded. So of course they canceled it.
But I'm not sure we're allowed to sit here, Alice.
Oh, Arnold, what are you so worried about?
And this one lands like a punch. The electric company didn't end because it failed, it ended because of money. Beaten by a plush toy. And the kind of money matters. The workshop had to keep the lights on, and when it came time to decide which show could generate the revenue to sustain the whole company, the answer was Sesame Street. Because Sesame Street had Big Bird, it had Elmo, toys, lunchboxes, an entire merchandising empire. The electric company had a silent Spider-Man and a man who loved reading. No plush toy to sell at Christmas.
He is he's. She is she's.
Sit with that as a grown-up. A program measurably working on a literacy emergency got switched off, partly because it wasn't good at selling merchandise. As a kid, that means nothing. As an adult who understands budgets and public funding and how the most valuable things are the hardest to monetize, that stings. The long game it won. The mission lost to the math. It usually does. And yet it never fully died. It lived on in reruns for years, came out on DVD, and got a full reboot in 2009. Every research-backed kids show that came after, and there are dozens, is walking through a door this one kicked open. It lost the business fight and won the long game anyway.
Well, mostly I read meters and an occasional magazine.
Which brings me, finally, to the thing I can't stop thinking about. I told you one person in this cast was secretly terrified the whole time. It was the future voice of God himself.
I passed my test. I passed my test.
Freeman has talked about this, and it's not the warm story you'd expect. He said the experience genuinely scared him. Not the kids, not the silly vampire bits, the trap. Terrified the whole time. He was a struggling, unknown actor, and he could see exactly how many performers got pegged as the children's show guy, and then never got to be anything else.
Hi again! Welcome back to the third half of Slip of the Lip!
He was afraid Easy Reader, this beloved character, would become the ceiling of his whole career. Think about how strange that is. The thing kids adored him for was the same thing he was privately afraid of. Every laugh, every fan letter was also a brick in a wall he wasn't sure he'd ever climb over.
Swoosh, flibble, block, and it came out of you.
And look at the timeline. The show ended in 1977. His real breakout, Street Smart, his first Oscar nomination, didn't come until 1987. A decade of being, to a lot of people, the guy from the kids show. The Fear and the Gift. A decade of that fear being completely reasonable. So here's the realization that recontextualizes everything. The footage you watched as pure, easy joy, Easy Reader, the most relaxed man alive, was made by someone quietly frightened that this very job might end his dreams. What felt like magic to us was to him a gamble he wasn't sure he'd survive.
And it came out of you.
And yet, out of that same job, he got a friendship with Rita Moreno that lasted the rest of their lives. He's called it the start of a wonderful friendship that began the day they met on that set. And out of that same job, a generation of kids who hated reading learned to read. He was scared the whole time and did it anyway. Why it hits different now. He came out the other side as one of the most respected actors in the history of the medium. Both things, the fear and the gift, same man, same footage. Rita Moreno said it best years later. She always saw the show as a kind of community service. They worked incredibly, incredibly hard, and it was absolutely worth it. A wonderful, wonderful experiment.
Here's a sample of your work coming off the assembly line now. Would you read a little for us?
All right, Wayne.
And maybe that's the whole thing. As a kid, the Electric Company was a feeling, a funky theme, a yell, a vampire scared of vowels, a guy who loved books. As an adult, you find the engineering, the 18 months of research, the federal emergency, the fights between the funny people and the serious people, the legends doing the humblest work of their lives, and a Spider-Man who couldn't talk so you'd have to read. The sign-off. You find that the easy joy was anything but easy to make. And knowing all that doesn't ruin a single frame. It makes it hit so much harder. That's why I go back to these. You watch something from when you were small and realize the adults who made it were exactly that. Adults with stakes and fears and arguments and a mission they were genuinely afraid they might fail. So tell me, what's the one thing from this show still living rent-free in your head? The yell? The silent E? A song you can't shake? Drop it in the comments. Yours will unlock a memory for someone else. And if there's another show or movie from your childhood you want me to dig into like this, tell me below.